Hello, good morning. My name is Jamal Khan. I'm a senior tax partner at the Churchill Tax Group. And today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, which is restructurings and reconstructions. Restructurings of businesses and companies and other entities. So I'll share my slides. Right, here we are. So yeah, I get instructed, and my firm gets instructed on lots of restructurings of businesses. This could be property businesses, trading businesses, several reasons, several factors that could lead to restructuring. I will discuss those in a short while. Okay. So this is the just a little bit about our firm in terms of who we are. We're specialists in tax law and tax planning and tax investigations and dispute resolutions. That's what we do, and that's what we specialize in. That's what we're known for. What is a restructuring? So what is restructuring? Essentially, when there is an ownership structure that needs to be changed, or a company that's owned, the ownership structure needs to be changed, the company ownership needs to be changed. We need to separate two businesses, for example. One is a trading business, one is a property business, and they're all in one company. That needs to be separated. There are things like demergers, there are share for share exchanges, there are hiving in a business or hiving out a business, or hiving up a business. So there's quite different forms of restructuring that can be done to make the overall process a lot more efficient, tax efficient, and commercially efficient. Most of these are commercially driven, and that's what HMRC like to see, is that any form of restructuring must be commercially driven and not tax driven. So when to restructure? That's quite important. So, for example, if we've got an entity that's no longer needed, or it's an entity that's causing problems, and we need to remove that entity, put another entity, or bring a holding entity within the owners and the trading entity. So that's when we will need to restructure. Ownership, for example, as I said, if you bring in a holding company within a trading company and a property company, or owners and the trading company, or owners and the property company, if you need to bring in a holding company, or you need to remove the holding company and add another entity, that's when you need to restructure. Or, for example, when you're moving residence of a company from offshore to the UK, or you have an offshore property company, which is where we get instructed most of the times. People used to set up offshore BVI companies, and I used to, and they thought it was efficient at that time. There were some tax efficiencies at that time, but then the government changed the rules. So we are being instructed on bringing onshore lots of those offshore entities and having to restructure, setting up a UK company. I'll give you a few examples in a few minutes. So we're changing domicile, changing residence, offshore companies, offshore property companies, UK property companies, UK trading companies, needing to, for example, if there are two different types of businesses that need to be separated, then we would restructure property companies that need to be, for example, one is looking at one particular aspect, commercials, one is looking at residentials, and we need to restructure them for various purposes. This is where we would come in and restructure. Okay, so let's quickly dive into some examples and what is a restructuring. So for example, here we have one scenario where we have an offshore BVI or Jersey-based or Guernsey-based company, or that owns some properties in the UK through another property company, and the owners realize it's costing them an arm and a leg to keep the BVI company, and plus it's not tax efficient, plus a lot of tax problems, commercial problems. For example, they can't get a bank loan, they can't get a mortgage, having a bank account is impossible for such people. We've seen several examples where people are struggling commercially, and the fees that are being charged by the offshore trustees and directors is substantial. So this is a typical scenario, beginning scenario that I'm normally presented with. What we would do is we would do, this is kind of the step 2 of restructuring. We would set up a new co, which would be owned by the owners, the offshore entities there. So we would essentially do a kind of a share-for-share exchange between the owners and the offshore entity. So the offshore entity takes, the new offshore entity releases its assets to the UK company, or passes its assets to the UK company on a kind of as an intergroup company, and then there's a share-for-share exchange between the owners and of the offshore entity and the new entity, and the new entity would essentially own the UK property company, which would then own the properties. So this is this. I'll go to the next slide, so you can see kind of the end result. So we've essentially the end result would be that you would remove the offshore structure completely, and now you would have a UK entity owning which would be owned by the UK owners, the shareholders, and then that would have the UK properties. Now this is a very simplified structure. This is a clean structure. Now you can go to a bank, raise finance, get a mortgage, open a bank account, not have problems with not have to deal with the offshore trustees or the offshore nominee directors, not have to pay their fees. So there are so many benefits. So similarly, if it's a UK entity and we need to move some properties in or out or separate the two businesses, for example, there's a trading business and a property business, or there are different types of trades. The similar type of restructuring would be done, and the ultimate result would be that it'd be a lot cleaner and leaner model that the owners can use going forward. So there are tons of benefits of restructuring the business. Or if we need to interpose a holding company, because it's usually better if the business is growing, it's better to have a holding company in there. Right, the process for restructuring is that we always get a clearance from HMRC. The clearance the clearance application process is quite lengthy. It takes a while to prepare the file, to prepare the application, and then to file it with HMRC to make sure that it complies with all the requirements. HMRC then have 30 days to respond to the application. 8 out of 10 times we would receive an acceptance from HMRC, because we've been doing it for such a long time. I'm familiar with kind of HMRC's requirements, but HMRC sometimes can come back and say, no, we don't agree. I think you are trying to dodge taxes or whatever reason. So, or they might not be happy, or they might have lots of reasons. We had one restructuring application about 2 years ago. It took us 16 months to get the clearance from HMRC. We just kept them going backwards and forwards, back and forth, and ultimately they accepted. We had to change a few things, but that's 2 out of 10 times. 8 out of 10 times, HMRC do accept, and they come back within 30 days. They say that's fine. There's usually a lot of commercial rationale behind it. Then once you've had the clearance application from HMRC that there are no tax implications, there are different types of taxes at HMRC. There's a statutory clearance application, there's a non-statutory. We normally go for the statutory where it's relevant, but if it's not relevant, then we go for a non-statutory clearance as well. And once we have the clearance from HMRC, then we start the restructure. There's a lot of changes to the ownership. You issue new shares, you should create new companies, create new entities, directors. There's agreements, there's resolutions, there's board resolutions, there's minutes of meetings. So there's quite a lot of documents that need to be completed. Legal team needs to be involved as well in the restructuring. And once that's done, then we get an adjudication from HMRC on the stamp duty side as well where needed. The time frame for restructuring. So if everything goes well, HMRC respond to you within 30 days frame and they accept it. I would add another 3 months on top of that. So please allow. So from starting, if I was to be instructed today, it would take me say a month to prepare the application, to file it, and then HMRC would have a month. That's 2 months, and then I would add another 3 months on top of that, another 2 to 3 months on top of that. So maybe allow 4 months to 5 months for the whole process. If HMRC keep on refusing the application, then that could take a lot longer. Okay. And to summarize, yeah, restructuring requirements is mostly commercially driven. You get a simplified structure. Don't forget the HMRC clearance, and then the legal process behind a restructuring, which can take a long time. Sometimes you might need to appoint a conveyance team or a legal team to transfer properties across from one to the other. There should be no capital gains tax, there should be no stamp duty on it, but still it needs to be done in a very careful way. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me through our website or through calling our office, and I will see you at the next webinar. Thank you. Bye.